So to remove this cylinder out of the housing, this cast housing, I need to undo this and it'll be quite tight. So the one thing you've got to remember is that there's a retainer in here and that's a pin. So the pin fits across the slotted section of the housing. So I need to take that pin out. Now sometimes that pin's tight. That's all well and good. I can tap it out, or can I? Sometimes paint will accumulate around the pin entry and exit. So by hitting it, you've got to make sure that it is going to move, because what I can do is damage that pin and burr the end of it over so it doesn't come through the cast housing. So in essence what you'll do is give it a gentle tap to see if it moves. In this case it does, good. If it didn't move, what I'd be inclined to do is wash it up with solvent, and I'd scrape any additional paint off around the edges. Very careful not to dig into the pin. Give it a clean up and give it a wipe, like so. Now that pin has a taper on the head to start it back into the hole. So if I give it a slight tap, I can pull that pin out, like so. So wipe the pin up, put it to one side, roll this back over. Be careful you don't break that stem off this capillary tube. So what I need to do is get that shifter back on to that cancellation. So with a large shifting wrench, see if it moves now, and it does. So the interesting thing with this particular concept is that this cylinder here actually turns to accommodate that pin. So if you screw this all the way home when you reinstall it, you'll find that you can't get the pin in, so you'll have to turn this back to the flat section so that the pin slides past this flat section like so in the housing. So now we can undo this. So by holding it up, don't damage this thread here, be very careful of that. So stay well up the housing so that you're away from the thread and don't damage anything. So getting the shifter back on there, like so, and just continue to undo it. Can I undo it by hand from here? Yes, I can. So wind it out. Now remember what I said, it's cast. So as you take this out now, like so, and there's the big seal I was talking about. Now, look at the thread difference. Coarse, fine. Because it's a fine thread, don't drop it and damage it, the thread on the housing. So what we need to do is clean all this up. But now that we've got this out, it enables us to clean all of this in here, all the hidden aspects of the casting, make sure it's nice and clean. I suggest you don't hit any of this with a screwdriver, because that seal has to seat on that taper. What we're looking for now is any wear or scouring within the cylinder wall. So hold the cylinder up and have a look inside the cylinder to see if there's any scouring. The scouring will be vertical, it won't be horizontal. The scouring will be vertical, as is the action or the actuation of the cylinder or the piston itself. So the piston comes in and out like this, hence the scouring will be in a vertical stroke. So by running your finger round inside the cylinder, you can establish whether there is any scouring. Now if there is significant scouring, I'm on site, what do? Well, I need my pump back. As I suggested earlier, some 600 wet and dry, and you'll take the edges off that just enough to sustain some sort of life or longevity from those packers until you get a new cylinder. But I suggest if the cylinder is scoured, you replace it. Now you'll notice I've pulled that out of there. There's a taper, and then it goes into the barrel. On the other end, the foot valve end, there's also a large taper, and it goes onto the barrel. Now there's a trick here. When you reinstall new packings on this particular piston stem and you're ready to reinstall it, remember what I said about these packings. They're Chevron seals, so they're lip seals, two seals facing the pressure. So gently sit that on the ground. Now the packings go in this way, like so. So the two lips up face the pressure because the piston goes up that way, because that's its pressure stroke going up. So when it goes up, the ball seats in the seat itself, the packings pick up the rest of the fluid in the chamber and send it up towards the outlet for your hose. So these seals, because they're lip seals, if I put them on the piston, like so, now this is purely for a demonstration purpose, you can see that those lip seals face up. Now, if I didn't take that out of there, I would be pushing this back through the pump as such. And before I attempted to do that, I would put this base nut and castellated nuts with the packings back in there to guide the piston up to the end of the stroke and keep it straight for me so that I'm not kicking this to one side. The reason I'm showing you this is, look at these Chevron seals, they're facing the pressure. So if I try and shove them back into that taper, I'm actually pushing them backwards. So what I'm doing in essence is opening those lip seals out that way. So the force is coming from the taper back this way. The appropriate way to put these pistons in the cylinder is by, with the new packers on, putting them in that way. So primarily that taper is facing the non-pressure side of the packings, and it doesn't tend to tear the face of them open. So that'll ensure longevity of your pump. So that's the appropriate way to put them in. But as I said on site, if I couldn't get that out and undo that, and the cylinder was in good repair, that you have no alternative but to actually put it back in there. Now, when you reinstate all this and you put 60 foot-pound of torque back on this and screw it up, those packers will be kept in a sequence. The sequence being the retainer, the packers, the retainer. So they'll keep them harnessed so that they can't slop around like this. And there's a good chance that you can get nice and square to get them back up into the piston cylinder itself without damaging them too much. Sometimes you have no choice. But just remember to be gentle with the way you do it, and don't damage this piston, and don't damage this by dropping it on other alternate parts prior to reinstallation. So on site I've washed everything and I'm going to put it all back together. So the one thing to ensure that I've divorced the old packings from the new ones. I've got everything I need here in front of me, and if I get lost, if in doubt, read the instructions. The reason I said that you have to keep this stem nice and clean is because what we're going to do is, you notice when the rack of packings go in there, there's no spring washer. So you're relying on this thread to go back up into the end of the piston and hold all of this on the end of that piston under maximum pressure. So what we do is we clean this up. This thread is impeccably clean, and we utilise a thread locker. So what I use is a thread locker such as 243. So how do I remember that? 243 is blue. If you use the red one, there's a good chance you won't get that a red colour thread locker. You won't get this undone easily. So all this does is just holds it for you. So irrespective of doing it up to 60 foot-pounds, that is just another keeper or a means of retaining that end cap in that piston to ensure it doesn't come undone. Because believe me, if this comes undone under pressure, you'll smash all the bottom out of this pump itself. So that air motor that drives this has the capacity to shove all of this out through the bottom of the pump. So that's why we ensure when we put it back together, safety first, we do it properly, follow the procedure and ensure that everything's tight and done as per the manufacturer's recommendations. They write the recommendations for a reason, and that's why we follow them, to ensure that when we put this back together, it's done correctly, appropriately, and it's safe.